Hello, and welcome to the You Are Love Ministry podcast with Pam Baggott and me, Brenda Poarch. And actually, we've been looking at the family tree of Jesus, and there are three women that we've been looking at. Last time we looked at Tamar. She has an interesting story, so if you missed it, go back and watch it. And then today we're going to look at Rahab. Now, both of these women are ones that more than likely man wouldn't have included them on the family tree because, well, they're not exactly what you call stellar. But the Bible gives us the good, the bad, and the truthful, no matter what. So they are listed in the bloodline of Jesus. And I just kind of wonder, if we do our family tree, Pam, would you want such ladies listed in your family tree? Would you make a picture to hang on the wall and put their names up there and tell people about them?
Probably, yeah.
You're
I've
just
done
crazy that way, huh?
yeah, I'm absurd. I've done my family tree and huge family tree. I've got over 2,000 people on my family tree.
Wow.
And I discovered that most of us probably have some bad apples, whether we know it or not. And so I've got heroes and villains and slave owners and abolitionists and every kind of mix you can get, I've got in my family tree. And I think that's not so unusual. We all do.
Well, I've told you that my family, my dad's family, I think my mom's family too, all originated from Florida, as far back as I know, several generations. And I believe Florida was like the penal colony for the original colonies.
Georgia was too.
Georgia was too. And so they would bring people down that were bad and dump them off and say, good luck, surviving with the alligators and the snakes and all the critters down in Florida. And so I figured I probably don't want to do my family tree.
I think it gets some good stories out of them.
Yeah, grins and giggles.
That's what I like is good stories. Okay. Well, the second woman in the family tree of Jesus was Rahab, and this is a good story. Rahab was a prostitute in the city of Jericho. She was not a Jew. This was the time when the people of God were ready to take back their land after hundreds of years in Egypt where they were slaves. And God rescued them and led them back to Israel, and they were ready to take the first city, Jericho. Now, Jericho was a strong city. It was surrounded by a wall that was thick enough for homes to be built on the top of it.
Oh,
And
wow.
Rahab lived in one of those.
Mm-hmm.
The people of Jericho had learned of God's people and of God's power, and they were afraid and hiding behind the wall and its gates. And the leader of the Jews was Joshua, and he sent two men into the city to spy and learn about it. The spies stayed at Rahab's house, but the king of Jericho learned this and sent his men to bring the spies to him. Well, let's read what happened next in the book of Joshua, chapter 2, beginning in verse 4. Then the woman took the two men and hid them. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. And it happened as the gate was being shut when it was dark that the men went out. And where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with stalks of flax, which he had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan, to the fords, and as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. Okay, a prostitute in the family tree of God's son.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of a prostitute with a heart of gold from old movies, but this one, she had faith, lots of faith.
She did have lots of faith because when I picture those men, coming to her door, I don't have the scene with them politely knocking on the door and saying, excuse me, we're looking for someone. Might you have seen them today? I doubt seriously that it went that way.
No.
And so they were more than likely forceful. I mean, we weren't there. We don't know, but I'm just kind of going by human nature. And so I would think that that'd be terrifying because if they came in and they found those men, I don't think they're going to say, oh, that's okay.
No.
We'll forgive you. It really could have cost her life. And so the ability to lie and to deceive, maybe her profession helped her with that. Like maybe she had a little history or experience.
Skill sets.
Yeah, in keeping secrets and telling lies?
Mhm.
Maybe that's may have helped her a little bit. But as I look, think about that in my mind, as you said, her house was on the roof. And the scripture said that the men left and they shut the gate. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe she even got to see them leave, that, she knew that they were headed out to Dodge. I don't know. I guess we don't know.
No.
Just me babbling on. All right. So let's see what happens next, starting in verse 8. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Shinon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since you have shown kindness, that you also will show kindness, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token, and spare my mother, my father, my brothers and sisters, and I'm not reading it straight, sorry guys,
You're doing
and
fine.
all that have had, and all that they have, and deliver our families from death. So the men answered her, Our lives for yours, if none of you tell this business of ours, and it shall be when the Lord has given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with you. So she is smart. She is acknowledging that God is God, and that's huge. Then she goes on to say, we've heard these stories. We know the God that you serve. We've heard about the Red Sea. We know what you did to those kings. And so now there's not even any courage. When we heard that, our hearts drained. There's no courage left in anybody. So can you do a girl a solid? Can you make me a promise? I've been nice to you. So will you be nice to my family? And they said, yes. But there is a provision. Nobody can talk about this. And as we study this story, I wondered, did she wait till kind of the last minute to tell her family? Or were they trustworthy enough to hold that secret for whatever period of time it was? We don't know. But what we do know is that they must have kept the secret. I mean, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Seems like it.
So she
The
was
rate up.
wise enough. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Finish.
Well, she was wise enough to not just hide the spies, but now she's bargaining for the literal lives of her family, because she already knows that when God says it, it's going to happen. And that land's going back to those people. And she's wise enough to know that it's not going to be pretty. And so they've made the promise. We'll see.
Her wisdom is amazing. If the raid on Rahab's home was the stuff of movies, but so was the way she rescued the spies.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the next part of it in verse 15. Then she let them down by a rope through the window. Her house was on the city wall.
Mm-hmm.
She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, Get to the mountain. Let the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterward, you may go your way. So the men said to her, We will be blameless of this oath of yours which you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household to your own home. So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath which you made us swear. And then she said, According to your words, let it be. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord at the window.
So it sounds to me like as soon as they left, she put the cord out.
She didn't know when they were coming back. They didn't either.
Exactly. She didn't know when they were coming back. So now that makes me wonder again, if she didn't know when they were coming back and she put the cord in the window immediately, did she go gather her family immediately? Because I mean, she told them to hide for 3 days. So I don't know. God didn't tell us, so that means I don't need to know. But I think it's interesting, how all that played out. Because if she didn't know for sure if they were going to be there for 3 days. I have to add that to my list of things to ask when I get to heaven.
Okay.
But I have a feeling I'm not going to care at that point.
No, but still, it's fun to have the list.
So, and I think it's interesting that this is like a business plan. You do A, B, and C, and we'll do E, F, and G. You got to have your family together. They've got to be in your house. You have to have a cord hanging from the window. You can't tell anybody, and they can't tell anybody. And if they leave your house, their blood is on their own head. It's their fault. So I mean, her wisdom, what you said, I think it's just kind of remarkable. So, and this is an exciting story. We have spies and danger and escape, but Rahab is not a pure person. I mean, we've already said she's a harlot. So why would God use a sinful person? I say that, but I guess we're all sinful, aren't we?
Right.
But I mean, she wasn't a Jew. So why would God use someone like that? And then why would he let us know about her?
He likes us to know these things. Okay. She didn't spend her life with God and his people.
Right.
She doesn't know his law or
Right.
what is right and what is wrong. But like her people, she had heard of the things that God's done for his people. And she believes that he's the true God and she wants to serve him. Now that's where her wisdom shows up.
Yes.
Everybody in her town knew the things that she knew about this God, these people and their God. But she figured out some things deeper than that. She knew he was the big thing, the big deal. And she wants to be his servant. She risks her life to do what she can for his people. She's intelligent, she's brave, she has faith. She still needs to learn God's law, but her lies happened before she had the chance to do that.
That's true.
Now, God's plan for capturing the city of Jericho involved days of his people walking around the city walls while the people inside became more and more afraid. And when God caused the walls to fall at the end of those days, Joshua remembered the harlot Rahab who had saved his spies. So, Brenda, why don't you read Joshua 6:22-25?
Okay. But Joshua had said to the 2 men who had spied out the country, "Go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman, and all that she has, as you swore to her." And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. But they burned the city and all that was in it with fire. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. So, wow. I mean, this was a complete destruction of everything in the city. God was wiping clean the whole city before he returned it to the Israelites. And because of her faithfulness to God, and she was able to survive, and she was one of the people. She became one of his people. And Matthew 1:5 says that Salmon begot, I have trouble here, folks, Boaz by Rahab. So Boaz was a man who married Ruth. We remember that. And they became ancestors of Jesus. So we have the story of Ruth, who was not a Jew. Since Boaz was a child of Rahab, he was only half Jewish. And because his wife, Ruth, was from Moab, there are 2 Gentile women in that family on Jesus's family tree. That's interesting, too. So, Pam, why do you think this is important? What is the significance of these women not being Jews?
Okay, most women are not going to be comfortable if they know what kind of disreputable people are mixed with the good ones on their own family tree. But there is something very uncomfortable in knowing the kind of people there were on the tree of Jesus, the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
Ezekiel 18 comes to my mind. It was a really firm and specific chapter about accountability.
Mm.
And it throws out the idea that children are born carrying the sins of their parents. It tells us that sons are not responsible for their father's sins, and fathers are not responsible for their children's sins.
Right.
Jesus is not contaminated by his ancestors' behavior. And God likes to use the most unlikely people he can to bring about his will. So there's these two reasons maybe for making it make sense that he would use someone like Rahab and Ruth. And when you come down to it, what you described about Boaz, um, his like he was only a half Jew, and by the time their son was born, that's a quarter. So that was not a lot of Judaism in there. So that was a little bitty thread of Judaism hanging on that tree,
Uh-huh.
but it kept working. Okay, so Rahab's mentioned in two other verses in the New Testament. Hebrews 11:31 says, "By faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace." And James uses her as an example of how important faith and works are together in James 2:25. Likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way?
Justified by works. Now we know we can't work our way into heaven, right? And we also know that at this time, Gentiles were not a part of God's chosen people. So, what do you think James is talking about when he says that Rahab was justified by works?
Well, James's book is a very clear and specific lesson on faith.
Yes.
One of his most significant points is that faith isn't just believing there is a God. Faith is what drives us to act on what we believe. Sometimes we say, if you get baptized without repenting, then all you did was get wet.
Right.
Because our belief has got to lead to action, or we are no better and more saved than the demons. The Bible says, believe in God and they tremble, and yet they're not saved.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've heard a lot lately, and it's a really good point. Just because you believe that God is God and Jesus is his son does not mean that you're saved, because Satan believes that. He knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've heard people say, "Oh, well, just believe, just believe." But it's a lot more than that. It doesn't, faith without works is dead, is what James says. So that's what we need to remember, is that we need to put that faith in action.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, love is a verb, well, so is faith. All right. So I just think this is a super interesting story. We've been talking about the women that are in Jesus's family tree, or on Jesus' family tree, in his bloodline. And, something that you said a minute ago kind of struck me, that we are told that children are not, Jesus's bloodline wasn't, or Jesus wasn't corrupted or damaged by the people before him. The father's not responsible for the son's sins, and vice versa. And so uh, I did quote you correctly on that, right?
Close enough.
Close enough.
You got the gist. You got the gist.
Got the gist of it. Okay. And so I think that we need to remember that the same thing goes about salvation. Just because your mother or your grandmother, your grandfather, whatever, was a faithful Christian, that doesn't pass down to you. Everybody has to be responsible. We have to all work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And so, we need to remember that we are responsible for our own, what happens on Judgment Day. And so that to me, it's encouraging to know that people like Rahab and Tamar and Bathsheba, that we haven't talked about yet, were in the lineage of Jesus, regardless of their stories. God was able to use them. And so I just think that's a point that we all need to remember, is that God can use you no matter what, but you have to believe and you have to put that faith in action. So,
He will go beyond. He'll take the best of what we could be and
mhm.
help us to find that. And sometimes pushing away the dross of what's not good in us is an effective way to show that it's him doing things in our lives. Rahab was living sinful life. She was not the kind of person that would consider an upstanding citizen in
Right.
any community.
Right.
But God knew what was in her heart. He knew what she was able to become. And so he used that. He manages to brush away all the ashes and dust and whatever might be on us until he finds the good stuff inside us. So even a person feels like I've lived a bad life, God can't use me, I'm no good. No, if you can trust him and move toward him, he will show what's great about you to yourself. You may not see it until he shows you, but it's there.
Exactly. Exactly. So those are basically two of the points that I was going to point out for what can we learn. Just because you believe in Jesus doesn't mean that you're going to be saved. You've got to act on that faith and that obey him. And Rahab's family was spared because she acted on that faith. Just knowing that these spies were from the Lord wasn't enough. She needed to literally risk her life to hide them. And then she had to have the wisdom and forethought to make that bargain with them. And then she's got to follow through on that bargain. So there was a lot of action that went along with her faith. And the Bible tells us that it worked, that she was able to live in I think it's Israel or
With them. She was outside the camp at that point. They didn't have Israel established yet,
right.
but she was traveling with them from there on.
So, and that was the first thing. The second thing is what you just said, that God can use anybody. I mean, Rahab was a prostitute. No matter who you are. Exactly. I mean, you put it beautifully. God can use you. So don't ever give up on that. And then I think that the third thing that I took from all this is that I've known people. Well, I think about people in gangs. I don't know a lot about gangs. I grew up in the suburbs, and we were like the little everyday, leave it to Beaver neighborhoods. But I've heard that there are children that grow up in certain neighborhoods that it is incredibly difficult to escape that culture.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, if the parents are involved in drugs, the kids are going to get involved in drugs, and we need to fight that. We need to fight that. And so I look at Rahab and I think she turned her life around. Now we don't know what her life was like, but I just can't believe that she'd go back to being a prostitute, hanging out with the Jews.
No.
I don't think she would have done that. But we're not defined by our ancestors. Just because we've had 5 preachers in our family doesn't mean that we're automatically going to become a preacher. And of course, as a woman, you wouldn't, you become a teacher. But if you're a man, you become a preacher. But we have that choice. And if you come from a long line of people that are atheist, you can still make your own choice and follow God. If you come from a long line of criminals, you can still decide to follow the law and change your life. If you come from a long line of uneducated people, you can still go to college. You can still get that schooling. You can break that pattern of poverty, or whatever your ancestors are, whatever your family tree has shown. And I think that's important for us to remember. We are individuals. God sees us as individuals and will be judged as individuals. Rahab made some really wise decisions when given the chance. And I believe that every one of us, God gives an opportunity on a regular basis to come to him. And we just have to act on that faith. We just have to do it.
He gives us those choices a lot throughout our lives, and we just don't always see them, but he keeps giving us another. In foster care, you meet a lot of situations where 2 children can come out of the same environment, the same horror, abuse, whatever, and be totally different humans.
Yes.
Because one can take all of that awfulness that they experienced and can become bitter and angry and caught in the same traps the parents were in. And the other one can say, I'm going to try to use my chance to learn. I'm going to learn everything I can. And they can learn about God and say, I want to give my life there. They can absolutely take two different paths
Yes.
from the same exact situation.
Mhm.
So it's always up to us individually whether or not we're going to let ourselves be led one way or the other.
Mhm.
And ancestors can be that. I knew some kids that firmly believed that they had no choice, even though they were offered a chance to learn about God, learn about education, and learn about other opportunities that they had, but they believed that their destiny was to be what their family and everybody they were born to were. Literally could almost say it in those words, not exactly, but close to it. And say, this is what I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm from. This is what my people are. This is what I'm born to be. And they have a hard time shaking free of that belief and believing that God might have another plan they could choose.
Mhm.
But it's sad how often it happens, but it does.
And it really is sad because when we are baptized, Scripture tells us that we come up out of the water a new creature, a new person, washed clean, fresh start. And if we are offered that opportunity to wipe the slate clean and to start over, I think that is a fantastic, wonderful blessing that
Mhm.
I pray that everyone take advantage of, because you don't have to continue the legacy of your family. Whatever that legacy is, you can be a new creature through Jesus, and you can start a new life. It all goes back to putting the faith in action. So it's interesting to study these people, especially the women in Jesus's bloodline. But I think it's also important to note that, as you said, it didn't define who Jesus was or what he could do. And it certainly doesn't define who we are. So, all right. Well, we got one woman down. We got actually
No,
two now.
yeah.
So I got one more to go. And I'm looking forward to the study of Bathsheba because I've heard so many different opinions about her guilt in the situation. So kind of looking forward to that little debate.
She's also them things people don't hear about Bathsheba may come up. Things that happened later in her life. She was,
You're right. We don't hear about her other than, going to the palace and losing a baby.
but we will next week because we're going to follow those too.
Nice. I like it. All right, guys, we appreciate you joining us. Let's just say ladies, we appreciate you joining us today. And we hope you'll come back because God's word is just full of information, wisdom, and inspiration that we all need. So we hope you have a blessed week. Thanks for stopping by.